Yeah, okay, time to live free. Plenty goals I'm achieving. Some real life topics and talking financial freedom. Mindset, soul and love, everything in between. This is Freedom Podcast. Tune in, live free. Hey, got my mindset right and I got the drive. Planning one day, no more job, no more 9 to 5. Love, money, mind. Love, money, mind. This is Freedom. Tune in, cause it's going down. Woo!
Hi, this is Anna and welcome to another episode of Your Freedom Podcast. In this episode, I interview Rachel Foy. Rachel is a food addiction therapist and eating psychology coach. She's got 12 years of experience both in the UK and Dubai, and she's also a qualified clinical and cognitive hypnotherapist, nutritional therapist, homeopath, and NLP, EFT and BWRT practitioner. She's a teacher of spirituality, soul work and feminine magic. Rachel also is an international acclaimed expert in eating dysfunction, an author, a podcaster and advocate for health at every size. And is also a pioneer in eating psychology and the creator of the food addiction recovery method. She's the author of a book called The Hungry Soul, passionate speaker on all topics related to food dysfunction, diet, culture, body image, female empowerment and addiction recovery. She's been featured in loads of the local and national press, including TV, and she lives in the UK in Cheshire with her husband Simon. So she's got a son and daughter. I met her at a female power event. She's really helping women open their eyes to what is really going underneath their addictive eating habits and then giving them the tools to change it. She's got an inspiring story which she's going to share today, and I'm so excited to have Rachel on the podcast. So, hi, Rachel. I'm really excited to be reconnecting with you because I think we were just working out it's over a year since we first
I know. Let's just not even go there. It's like 18 months has just disappeared like that, hasn't it?
Exactly. And we met at the Female Powers event. Was it Powers event? Was that what it was called?
Powerful females in power, something like that.
Females in power. That was
That's
it. And yeah, you already had your podcast out and you just really inspired me. I know you've got an incredible story to share. And obviously with Your Freedom Podcast, we focus on the 3 pillars being love, money and mind. So tell us a little bit about your sort of journey, really, because I know you're known as the soul-fed woman.
The soul-fed woman, there she is. Well, I was going to say how much time have we got? But I'll kind of start where I tend to start in these kind of conversations, and say that I was a very kind of normal growing up. I had an amazing family, didn't have any kind of childhood issues. I was very academic, worked very hard at school and at college and at university, but around kind of the high school age, which is actually quite a common time when some of us start to become insecure, etc. Yeah. I started to get a lot of body insecurities. I had a lot of self-confidence issues and I started dieting. Now, this might not sound like a big deal. However, that was the catalyst for me to then end up having a 14-year very dysfunctional relationship with food and myself, to the point of eating disorders, starving 1 minute, binging the next, food obsession, exercise addiction, making myself sick. And that just dominated my life until I was like late 20s or so. And that is the story that I now see as being this massive gift, because it's something that I teach about, which I'm sure we'll be talking about at some point. So that's kind of a very pivotal part of my story.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I'm not sure where you want to go with that, Anna, because there's many branches.
I was just going to ask you, because I think I can really relate to that, because I think sometimes it's like I see it as like finding a meaning from suffering, really, or finding a meaning from the pain that you go through. Yes. Actually, then you start giving out that goodness into the world from what you went through to help others that may go through something like that.
Absolutely.
What do you think kind of, I know obviously you were saying everything was fine, you just started feeling insecure. Was there like a certain moment, or was it a collective thing, or did you get quite kind of maybe obsessed with it? I don't know. What was it that kind of...
I mean, kind of looking back now in hindsight, which is always, is it a powerful thing or not? But when we've got the wisdom that we can like reflect back on something, I know for me personally, it was like sort of probably about 13, 14. So like puberty, body was changing. It was out of my control. And it was just a very innocent thing of, oh, I think if I just lost a little bit of weight, I might like myself a bit more. You know, like the circle conversations with girls and women, that sort of, you know, body dissatisfaction is really common. You know, I remember standing around in the playground with the magazines and like, oh, she's really thin and I want to look like her.
I remember
and
saying,
you know, and at the time my mum used to be a very chronic dieter, and I'm not blaming my mum at all, but it was just part of what I was seeing, being a girl growing a woman. And I think that, coupled with the fact that I did feel very insecure within myself, like I was a proper academic geek at school, like, you know,
I was as well.
You know, A-star student, top of the class. If I got 99%, it was just the worst thing in the world.
This is what I say to my boys now. I'm like, you've got a lot of pressure, because I was like, well, this was. I've been looking at how high my percentages were and stuff.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. But I think that well, I know I'm sort of laughing about this now, but the downside of that is that I did have this ridiculous high expectation of, I need to be the best. Like, it's not good enough if I don't do a good enough job. And not everybody sort of has that opinion of themselves, obviously. But for me, that really did start to become this obsession of, I don't really think I'm good enough. I need to try harder. I want to be the best. Didn't necessarily fit in at school massively, because I was like a bit of a geeky girl. So I wasn't, you know, like the in crowd, and the boys who used to play the football, like, weren't interested in me. Which, when you're 13 and 14, it's a big deal, isn't it? It's like,
I remember having that. It's funny, I had that as well.
And do you know what?
I was trying to be like this go-between. I was trying to like be friends with like the geeks, and then also become friends with the cool. And I was in the middle.
But it starts to form a lot of our beliefs about ourselves, because again, in hindsight, I now know that around that age of sort of 11, 12, 13, not only is like puberty kicking in for everybody, male and female, but we also start to put a lot of emphasis on our social circle, and we start to move away from the opinion of family, particularly, where, you know, like mum, dad upbringing is like the pivotal point of everything to us, and suddenly it's our peer pressure.
Exactly.
It's like their opinion of me is more important than what my mum and dad think. So that, coupled as well with, like, you know, I wasn't quite in the in crowd, I was a little bit of a geek, didn't quite like myself, it was just a combination of factors that started that slippery slope into initially the diet world. But as I said, it did end up going into some very dark places over that 14 years.
So was there like, and obviously this is like quite personal to share, so thanks for sort of being vulnerable and stuff, but was there like a pivotal moment that, because obviously you said it went on for quite a while, was there a moment, like your lowest point of, that was maybe like, not your light bulb moment, but kind of like, something's got to change? I
think the kind of the catalyst, there were loads of like low moments that I can, you know, probably talk about now, but we talk about the catalyst that actually caused the change. It was off the back of a long-term relationship. So I was actually engaged to someone that I'd known since college. We'd survived university together. We'd ended up moving abroad together. We were getting married. Our wedding was being planned. And 6 months before the wedding, he told me that he didn't want to be with me, didn't love me, and he was moving in with someone else. Right. And that was a bit of a defining moment, you know. And at the time, it was just the world fell from beneath my feet completely. You know, literally in the space of a sentence, it was like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was meant to do. I had no plans anymore. Like, everything just disappeared. And it was actually off the back of that, which again, in hindsight, it was the biggest gift ever for that to have happened. But that really did send me into a very, very dark place following it. Kind of trying to come to terms with, you know, having to move into my own apartment and, you know, splitting our things. And obviously there was a lot of family upset too, because my family knew his and vice versa. But I ended up seeing a therapist, is the long and short of it, to get some help, because a lot of my friends at the time were getting really worried about my mental health. Like, I literally wasn't eating. I was just disappearing in front of their eyes. I was not in a good way. But that was the catalyst. So it was seeing a therapist.
But understandably, going through something like that, I think.
But I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad it happened.
Exactly. I can relate to that totally. But yeah. So then, how did you then, because I'm just thinking there could be some people listening to this who could be going through the same or something similar. How did you then, if you thought, right, something's got to change, or how did you then make that move to sort of, you know, move into a more kind of like positive place, I suppose?
Definitely. Well, I think it's probably important to say, and I always say, you know, that being a truth teller is a big part of who I am and what I do. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say, oh, within like 24 hours, life was glorious and, you know, everything was back together again. It took time. But actually giving myself that space for that time was really crucial. And you mentioned about the pillars for you in, you know, your podcast, that sort of love pillar. It was really about me starting to put myself back into my world again, because I'd just fallen off the radar. And that's actually a big part of food issues, food obsession and eating disorders, which I now know to be true, is that often when women do have this inner battle with food and self and body, it's because they're often not in their own world. They're often not looking after themselves. They're often putting themselves way down at the bottom of their priority list. So for me, that act of, first of all, acknowledging that I did need help and that I couldn't just, you know, cope in the way that I tried to, but then also giving myself the space of, I'm going to just do this for me. Like, I need to do this for me, was actually really symbolic, because it was so symbolic for me to actually acknowledge that I needed help in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, you know, how often, I'm sure that you may have been the same in the past, do we just not ask for help? It's like, no, I'm fine, we're okay, I'm okay, everything's good.
We all do that so much, and just carry on, don't you? Just carry on. And I think actually a lot of people can relate to, I suppose, there's different levels as well, isn't there? Because I'm sure every woman that listens to this has always had a moment of time where they're not putting themselves first and kind of neglecting their diet or health and all, because I know I have. But then obviously when things get a little bit more serious, then, you know, that's when. Is there anything that you would recommend to people, that, like, anything that they could get support? Did a lot of family members help you? Did you reach out to family?
Do you know what? They didn't. And it's quite interesting, because as you've already referenced, like, this is the world that I now work in, like, professionally, and kind of see over my shoulder. I've written a book about it. I've got a podcast, but my kind of immediate family circle didn't actually know the depth of my issues until I started doing this work. So even at the time when I was in it, I didn't fully disclose to even like closest friends and family to what depth and to what darkness really my food and sort of personal struggles had taken me. It was very much that mask of, oh, you know,
Everything's fine.
Everything's not, it's not too bad, you know, I'm kind of getting on with things. So yeah, that's kind of interesting for you to reference that, because I think there is sometimes a lot of, well, stigma and a sort of shame and that sort of sense of weakness of, I don't want people to know. But that's not necessarily a bad thing when you start to let people know, you know.
Exactly. And I think this is what I found really interesting about this podcast, because I think whatever kind of thing that you've been through, because I can really relate to everything you said, that whole thing of like, yeah, everything's fine, or explaining bits, but it's just like, you just don't really want people to worry you. And if you've always been pretty independent,
this is exactly. I think as well, just to kind of mention about the food sort of issues, because there's sort of varying levels of like food problems that people can experience. And again, I'm just fully
that's good to share that,
my story.
People can realize if they're, because it's also questioning, is this really an issue? Because you just
exactly
push it aside, something.
I think when I kind of look back for me now, again in hindsight, there were so many red flags and there were so many signs of like, this is actually a bit of an issue now. Like, this isn't just you trying to be quote unquote good with food or trying to, you know, eat healthily. It had tipped into an obsession. And I think one of the things that I do often, you know, speak about now is if someone's relationship with food has gotten to the point of it's creating a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of just emotional capacity. You know, it's something that they think about the minute they wake up until the minute they go to bed. You know, it's constantly at the forefront of their mind. It's sort of dominating what they're saying yes to, what they're saying no to. That's an issue. Like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
Although when I say it's not normal, statistics actually say that there's a huge amount of people, particularly women, that can have a obsessive compulsive relationship with food, and they think that it is, you know, it's just them, and there's something wrong with them, therefore they don't want to talk about it, and they don't want to let people know to what extent their obsession has now become. And I do hear this quite often of women that come into my, you know, my spaces, my circles and programs, who will often say, I thought it was just me. Like, I thought that it was just me that was so obsessed and, you know, so caught up in this food thing. I didn't realize that actually there's so many other people, because
exactly,
it's not often acknowledged to the extent whereby we might do with, say, depression or anxiety, or, you know, just not feeling very good up here. Food for some people can be part of that mental health umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine. So would you, what was it that you tried? Obviously you had you were a therapist, you were going to speak in, you know, talk therapy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What else would you recommend that would be the kind of first steps? Obviously I know you're helping loads of women, and we can talk about your book as well and your podcast, but what if someone was listening to this and they thought, right, I have got a problem, what are any, you know, what can they do?
Yeah, kind of where to start. I think the first thing to actually do with anything, and this isn't just true for food, this is true for anything, is to actually acknowledge that there is an issue. Because quite often that self-awareness and self-acknowledgement, it can just escape us. You know, it's how many people just kind of pretend, or they just try and ignore it, or they just hope it gets better, or they just keep doing the same thing and hope that one day something changes. And actually to just stop and to just acknowledge that, right, okay, this thing right now I don't think is where I want it to be, or maybe this thing right now in my world, it is creating an issue or tension or stress or anxiety or fear. And just actually acknowledge that for yourself. That's the first key for any kind of change or transformation. Like, it's so important. And then off the back of that, it's then finding either support or a community, whether it be like a podcast like this, whether it's Facebook groups, whether it's books, whether it's things you can download, to just start gaining an understanding and information often, to start helping you have an awareness of, well, what actually is going on for you. Because like I said,
in this day and age, there's so many resources.
Oh, it's just infinite supply of resources, which is incredible. Like, the world that we live in now, there is pretty much nothing that we can't find if we want to. So that's an absolute blessing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, depending on someone's severity with kind of food stuff would really depend on where I often direct people. Some people get a huge amount of help and support and shifts actually from reading a book. Some people just need to like listen to podcasts or read things, and other people, they need a little bit more hands-on. So it kind of depends where somebody is, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. Would you, so come on, tell us about all the good stuff that you're doing right now, because I know you really inspired me to start this podcast, because I remember our conversation.
We did, didn't we? We spoke about it back in Manchester 18 months ago, and here you are.
How long has your podcast been out now? It's been out a while, hasn't it?
So I think we started the podcast about 3 years ago. I think, I will be honest, as you guys are listening to this, we have taken a bit of a break from it just because of everything that was kind of going on over the last 5 or 6 months. But it is going to be relaunching again in the next couple of months. There's still loads of episodes to listen to, but the podcast is called The Hungry Soul, and it's conversations around food predominantly. So sort of food dysfunction, food obsession, diet culture. There's a massive undertone of female empowerment. It's like, come on ladies, we can start taking our power back around bodies, body image, and just really delving into some of those, I suppose, taboo topics that often as women we don't openly talk about. You know, there's a lot of shame and guilt around food, which has been a huge eye opener for me over the last few years, of how often this is kept behind closed doors. You know,
and I think it's probably easy to hide for women, because women are always like, oh yeah, I'm on a diet. You could easily say you're on a diet. It's like seen as a positive thing. That, so you, do you know what I mean? As in when you're in that social culture, so you could easily hide it under that umbrella.
And this, do you know what though? This is part of the issue, Anna, because it's so socially acceptable for women to be dieting, and it's so socially acceptable that as women we're supposed to hate our bodies. that we've got this whole like social conditioning layer to the issues that we're now talking about. And a big part of my passion really is to start helping women realize the extent to which they've been brainwashed from diet culture, from patriarchal systems, if we're going to go there for a second. And as women, we are allowed to take up space in the world. We're allowed to have whatever body we have. We're allowed to look whatever way we want to. And it's only when we start to realize that we can then start to realize how deeply often we are so connected to diet culture, to social norms, to what we think we should be looking like.
Media and celebrities and all
yeah,
that kind of
media, celebrities, the magazines that I referenced that were a huge part of my teenage.
Going on as well, isn't there?
Massive.
Because actually, the more I think about it, and this is just me thinking here live, is that you've got things like bereavement, domestic abuse, different kind of taboo health conditions like cancer, things like that. But actually, the food thing, kind of, there could be another reason attached to it. I know there wasn't so much for you, but there could be something that has happened that's a trauma that then creates it as well. So it kind of encompasses like quite a it's not specifically a food, what's underlying it, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head. So the food issues for most people are not food issues. So for me, although I had an amazing upbringing, like I said, there wasn't any trauma per se, I did have some very unhelpful beliefs about me. So I said about the people pleaser, the A+ student, not quite feeling good enough. Where all those beliefs came from weren't necessarily from anything that happened, but I had them. And actually that kind of trauma response is a huge part of the work that I do, because for most people that do use food in that sense, so they use food to kind of cope, and they binge and they overeat, and then they try and restrict because they feel guilty for having eaten too much the day before. It's that coping mechanism, and actually that kind of trauma work for some people, there can be very specifically a trauma that they haven't perhaps processed or dealt with, regardless of what that might be, and for others it's more about their beliefs about themselves. But the beliefs about not feeling good enough is really, really common, especially with women, and that belief about not feeling enough, that also fuels diet obsession. I'll feel better about me if I was 10 pound lighter. I like myself if I was 2 dress sizes smaller. But then we put this condition on ourselves that if we don't get to that place, we then don't like ourselves, and then it starts to fuel that self-hatred. So it's a cycle that is it can be really, really toxic.
Hard to break as well.
Can be broken though. Just to let everyone know, can be broken.
How can you help people then? What is it you do to help people?
So the first thing that I do always, and although this can sometimes create a little bit of, oh, what do you mean this is what I need to do? I encourage and invite and really help women first and foremost to step away from diet culture. And that means literally, as it sounds, it's walking away from the diet groups, the diet plans, unsubscribing to the diet programs and the plans and the Facebook groups, and actually starting to reconnect back to their ability to know how to eat. I'm going to be honest, that again is not a quick fix. It's about unraveling, often for some women, decades and decades and decades of how they think they should be doing food. So the diet culture piece is really significant, and it's where I start with everybody, because it doesn't matter what level of food obsession or dysfunction someone has, there will always be some connection to diet culture.
Exactly.
That kind of weight fixation, weight obsession, that's always there in the background.
I can imagine, actually, because I think everybody, I can think, if you're also asking me that question now, I'm thinking about all the juice things and all these different things that I'm like following. Do you know what I mean?
I know, and
it's just ridiculous. It is like the norm, isn't it, as well?
I think statistics are kind of quoting around up to 80% of women in the UK at any given time are either on a diet or they're trying to get back on it. So that kind of suggests that 80% of women right now aren't happy with the body that they've got, and we have to start questioning where has that come from.
That is high. I think it's like interesting when you see it with kids, because I even see it in my boys, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's like we're sort of fueling another generation as well. And I think, like you say, digital stuff or social media especially
Yeah.
fuels it a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So on your podcast, what kind of things are you share? Either kind of like interviews with people, or are you sharing different topics to help people? Or
Yep. So all of that. So a lot of the kind of more recent ones are like solo episodes. So it's just me rambling on. It's just
yeah,
me when I've got something that's there, and I'm like going to turn the microphone on, and I'm just going to speak about it. So they're kind of a bit nitty and a bit raw and a bit just, straight to the point. There are interviews though with like guests that I've had on over the years now. But the new kind of release of the podcast in the next few months / towards the end of the year, it's going to be a mixture of everything. So it's going to be useful information. There's going to be questions that I'll be answering that I hear often in my kind of community groups, things that people often send me on email. It's like, how do I da 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 da, and also probably some amazing guests as well. So yeah, you have to keep your eyes open for that one.
yeah, brilliant. And tell us about the book. What's the book called?
So the book's the same name as the podcast. I kept it very simple, then I don't forget everything. It's called The Hungry Soul as well. And the Hungry Soul it's the 7 steps really to help someone overcome like binge eating, food obsession, or addictive eating. And it's really an amalgamation of my personal journey with what I've learned personally, and also with what I now know to be true professionally. So it kind of shares a lot more of my personal story, and also goes into a lot more practical things about what are the practical steps that somebody can take. So it's a lot of journal questions and actual exercises. So yes, that's available on Amazon.
I just have to say, where can people find it? Is that the paperback as well?
Yes, there's paperback and ebook. There is an audiobook in the pipeline. I've had so many people asking, like, when's the audiobook coming out?
People love audio stuff now, don't they?
They
I mean,
don't.
I'm a bit of a lazy reader, I've got to say. But if I'm really keen, I could just fly through a book,
Yeah, I'm the same actually. But I've listened to
do it
people's requests.
I just like to get my headphones.
You know how much time it takes though to record an audiobook? I'm like, I need to find the space to actually do that.
Yeah, I didn't know much about it actually.
It is coming. It's coming. So all I can say is keep your eyes open if you'd be interested in that.
Yeah, brilliant. And how can people find out more, get in touch, or because I'm sure you've got a group as well, haven't you?
I've got so I have a free program that I do. It kind of comes and goes throughout the year, and it's a free program on overcoming addictive binge eating, which is held in a support group over on Facebook. We have got one starting next week, depending on obviously when this is going out. But you can find all the details over at soulfedwoman.com. And I'm also Soulfed Woman on social media. So Facebook and Instagram are the two main platforms that I use.
Brilliant. And obviously with the other pillars that we talk about on this podcast are freedom in money and freedom in mind. And I'm sure mindset has come into a lot of your journey.
Massive. It's massive. I mean, one of the things that I have trained in kind of years ago now, but one of the things that I did, I am a clinical hypnotherapist, so I did become a little bit obsessed with mindset at one point. I still am, if I'm honest. So it's so interesting how our beliefs affect so much. The beliefs that we have about ourselves, the beliefs we have about the world around us, and mindset work, although some people kind of have this perception that it's a little bit fluffy and it's a little bit, you have to say affirmations in the mirror, and that's what mindset work is. It really isn't. Like, true mindset work is healing. Like, true mindset work is rewriting things. It's letting things go. It's understanding what thought patterns you might have that actually limit you. They limit your ability to see potential in yourself or the opportunities that you have around you. Like, that's true mindset work, is therapy based. And that has been a massive part of my personal recovery. It's still a huge part of the work that I do for myself and on myself maybe not every day, but certainly as much as I can. And it is one of the big things that I do talk about a lot in the book, and also in the programs that I do.
Because I don't know about you, I always feel that, like, I always used to be like, I couldn't have a bad day, or like if I felt upset, I'd be like, I can't be like that. I've got to be like that. You know, I've got to be positive because I'm a positive person.
Mm.
There was that subconscious thought all in one. That's me sort of like letting out that thought. And now if I am feeling like that, this was from my therapist, actually. Look at us with all our therapists. She was like, just let that moment like
Oh,
pass
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and just don't be. And since I've started doing that for over the last few years, it's weird. It's kind of like you give yourself a break and you just like release that energy or whatever, and just you feel so much better by not having to kind of be this perfect person all the time or be positive. Everyone needs to release stuff. If you don't release it consciously, it's going to come out
Yes.
somewhere else, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that as well is actually giving ourselves permission. You know, that kind of permission that if you're having a bad day, you're having a bad day. Like, can you accept that? Because that's also part of being human. And actually, this is, again, it's so relevant to kind of food stuff, because quite often, if somebody finds that they don't have the emotional, I'm going to say emotional intelligence, not in a judgmental way, but in the sense of if they feel sad or upset or angry sometimes, and it's something that they don't feel that they should, you know, it's like, I don't want to feel that, or it's not okay to feel that. Food is such an easy thing to use to push that emotion down.
Yeah,
You know, and that's where often food comes in as that like numbing agent.
yeah,
And
exactly.
actually making peace with the fact you are a human being and you're going to have waves of emotion, and you can't stop that. You can't tune out of it. You can't be selective. That's just part of being human. And the
Exactly.
faster you can make peace with that, the easier that life starts to become.
Yeah. So with your hypnotherapy, do you also, because NLP is really linked with hypnotherapy, isn't it?
Yeah, so I did study NLP as well. So that kind of
I've
academic geek
noticed
has never
everybody
left.
always goes hand in hand. I've noticed with people.
It's never left. Still studying, currently doing some more training right now, to be honest. But no, NLP is more about like use of language, so neuro-linguistic programming, and it's useful for sort of thought recognition and how you can start to change certain thought patterns, language use. I tend to, so me personally, I have an amalgamation of everything. I kind of have my own way of doing that.
Yeah.
But you know, the mindset, whether you call it mindset work or healing or inner work or self-exploration, self-discovery, they're all arguably the same thing, but they're so important when you're wanting to create some kind of change for yourself, because often change, it does take more than a decision, and it does take more than you saying, well, I don't want this and I now want this. There's a process to get from here to here. And this is, you know, this is really the message of what I talk about with the food is you need to start looking at it from a different perspective, which is always looking inside as opposed to trying to fix it on the outside.
Yeah, exactly. Fab, that sounds good. So as regards to like financial freedom throughout this whole COVID situation, I know obviously you're a female entrepreneur. Is most of your business kind of run online?
100%.
Yeah.
So I don't do any, at the moment anyway, I don't do any physical face-to-face. There may be like retreats and stuff in the future, but I've been online for the last 5 years. So previously I was physically in clinics with people in like health centers, therapy centers. But yeah, the internet is all I need, which is, from a freedom point of view, is blooming brilliant.
That's what I was coming to. And I think it's fab because I've kind of connected with so many inspiring women mainly, but there's also been a few men, I won't leave them out, who run online business, and I think I've reflected over this time thinking, I said to my mum, I've been self-isolated for years because I'm a single parent as well, working online, because obviously you connect with a lot of people online, but you kind of don't need to go out anywhere. Or, I mean, I was probably doing a bit more stuff out there, and I'd probably like meet people at Costa at times to get out, but recently I haven't done that as much. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's like when everything happened, I actually said to my husband, just highlights how much of an introvert I am, because life didn't really change. I was like, oh, it's just the children are at home now, but nothing else is different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that completely.
But I think that's just really inspiring that you've been through what you've been through and managed to kind of obviously work things for yourself. Now you're giving back to help other people, and you obviously understand it from a personal perspective and professional.
Yeah.
And then you've also managed to get the freedom in your life, be able to run an online business. I just think it's really inspiring for people who could be listening to this, who have got problems with their food or, you know, eating disorders and are in that cycle. And I suppose that first step is to kind of recognize it, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And for it, kind of without wanting to sound a little bit maybe too woo for some of your audience, depending on, you know, who might be listening.
We talk about, I'm also about, I know it sounds woo, so go for it.
Okay, I'm going to unleash the woo then just for a second. I have this fundamental core soul belief that women that often struggle with like food dysfunction, regardless of what degree that might be, that is actually their kind of spiritual awakening. Like that's their journey to start reconnecting back to them. And they have got so much potential to start help shifting the world, because they've got a gift, they've got a blessing, they've got something that they've gone through, they've got something that nobody can learn in a classroom. Like until you've been in the depth of it, it's not as easy to work with somebody, because you get them on this energetic, emotional, empathetic level that no textbook can teach you. So some
it's
of
the understanding, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You know, some of my personal clients over the years that have been through their own journey with me as their kind of therapist coach, they're now moving into the realms of this as a profession. Like they're now stepping into that place of, I now want to help other women with this, like you did with me, because it's been amazing. So, you know, kind of seeing it from that perspective, although granted, when you're in the depth of it, that might not be in your vision, but just to kind of put that little seed of curiosity that what if this is actually the reason why you're here? Like, what if this is a gift that you can start to use to empower so many more people?
Yeah,
and this is why you're going through
women
it.
are going to go viral.
This is what we're doing. We're creating a movement.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I think that sounds brilliant. As regards to like your proudest moment, what would you say it is?
Life? Are we talking life or business or both?
Was it both, really?
I think I was very proud when the book came out, I'll be honest, because it was a
It sounds
love-hate
like a fab book as
relationship.
well, though. I think it can really help people.
Yeah, it was very much a love-hate relationship getting that baby published. I rewrote it many times and I scrapped it on one occasion, deleted the whole thing and started again. So to actually get that done was like, quite chuffed with myself. Yeah, obviously having my children, getting married, they were like amazing moments, obviously.
Becoming an author is fab, isn't it?
Yeah,
I feel a bit of a cheat because I was a chapter in a book. I did do a book years and years ago, but it just was like an ebook. That took me ages and rewriting. That was about being a mum and mum in business sort of thing. I laugh about it now, but I don't really shout about it because it wasn't that. But the recent book, I just feel like a bit of a fraud because it was only a chapter. But what's interesting is that I had a couple of copies I ordered because I thought it'd be just quite nice to have them. I can give like a free copy away. And they arrived the other day, and my son was like, "So you actually wrote a book?" I told him before, but I think because he saw like 5 of them all the same.
Oh wow!
And he was like, "Is it in shops?" I was like, "Oh no, it's not that." I didn't actually get it. It was only self-published, unfortunately, you know. But he seemed really inspired, and that made me feel really proud. So I think it is a good thing becoming an author. And you've done a full book.
It's just
like my cheat one, doing a chapter.
Don't talk yourself down. There's a book there with your name on, whether it's a whole thing or it's a chapter. You've still put something probably quite vulnerable out into the world for people to read.
I did.
So, you know, that's
I do think
celebrated.
I do think that's like an awesome thing to be proud of because it sounds like a really good book. So everyone go to Amazon and check it out. And also, if you want to follow Rachel, you can have a look at Soul Fed. Just look for Soul Fed Woman, I think.
Yeah, just search for Soul Fed Woman. I will pop up on all manner of places, I'm sure.
And we'll also share all your links in the comments section. So if anybody wants to check it out, whether you're on YouTube or iTunes, it's in the notes. So yeah, massive gratitude for you to come on here and share your journey, because I do really appreciate that you shared your vulnerability, and you've also shared some really good kind of like tools or tips on how you can actually help people. You've got your podcast, there's loads of resources there, and if people are feeling like they could be, like you say, I see it as like turning that meaning of suffering into something
absolutely
good into the world, because that's really helped me. It's been really healing for me. And I'm sure other women listen to this who've got kind of like eating disorders or just issues maybe with food.
Diet obsession, actually.
Diet
just
obsession.
Diet obsession,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then go and check out Soul Fed Woman, and big thank you for all your time. It's been fab, and it's been good to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for asking me on, Anna. It's beautiful.
Great stuff. Thanks ever so much.
See you later.
See you soon. Bye.
Hey, thank you for listening. Hope you had a blast. Here to elevate your life. It's the Freedom Podcast. Love, money, mind. Love, money, mind. Wanna see you all win. Wanna see you all shine. Just make sure that you subscribe. Bringing good vibes. Join the Facebook group. Now it's time to change your life. Hope you come back. Right now is the chance. This is an experience. It's the Freedom Podcast.